Once, there was a very rich man. His name was Liam Thorne. He lived in a world of glass towers and silent cars, where everything had a price and nothing surprised him. His heart was as tidy and quiet as his enormous, empty home. One rainy evening, his driver took a wrong turn. Liam gazed out at the dreary streets, thinking of numbers and meetings. Then he saw her, a young woman, thin as a reed, standing outside a grocery store. Her coat was worn. She stared not at the rain, but through the window at a loaf of bread, her face pale with hunger. Liam's breath caught. He knew her. Her name was Alara. 4 years past, at a grand party, he had met her. She was bright and kind, and for one night, she made him forget he was lonely. He left before dawn, leaving money for her studies, thinking that was the end of it. But that was not the end. For as he looked closer, he saw 4 small boys clinging to her skirts. They were identical, with scruffy hair and solemn eyes. They were 3 years old. 4 years. 4 boys. Before we continue, kindly subscribe, like and comment on this video to support this channel. The limousine moved silently through the rain-soaked city at dusk, its dark body gliding over wet roads that reflected streetlights like shattered glass. Inside, the air was calm, controlled, and expensive. Liam Thorne sat alone in the back seat, his broad frame relaxed but his face tight with quiet exhaustion. He stared at a financial report glowing on his tablet, lines of numbers and rising charts confirming yet another successful merger. Another win. Another empire expanded. Yet his eyes were empty, his mind far away. "Congratulations again, sir," his assistant said through the earpiece. "The board is very pleased. The merger exceeded expectations." "That was the goal," Liam replied flatly. "Your driver will take you straight home unless you'd prefer to stop somewhere." "No," Liam said. "Straight home." He ended the call and leaned back, closing the tablet without finishing the report. Outside the tinted window, people hurried under umbrellas, couples walked close together, laughter escaped into the night air. Liam watched them with distant eyes. He owned buildings, companies, and futures, yet none of those people knew his name, and none were waiting for him. His phone buzzed again, messages from lawyers, partners, reminders of properties he barely remembered buying. He ignored them all. George, his longtime driver, glanced at him through the mirror. "Long day, sir." "They all are," Liam replied. George nodded. "Storm's getting worse." "There's always a storm," Liam said quietly. The city blurred past, glass towers and neon signs giving way to older streets. Liam rested his head against the cool window, feeling the familiar weight of silence press into his chest. His life was polished and successful, but empty. No voice waiting at home. No warmth. Just quiet rooms and expensive furniture. His thoughts drifted, unwillingly, to a memory he had buried. Soft laughter, warm eyes, a night that felt real in a life built on transactions. He frowned slightly, annoyed with himself. It was long over. It meant nothing. The limousine slowed. "Traffic ahead," George said. "I'll take a detour." "Fine," Liam replied without looking up. They turned onto a dim side street. That was when Liam's gaze lifted, drawn by something he couldn't explain. The car passed a small, worn grocery store with a flickering sign and fogged windows. Beneath the weak fluorescent lights stood a woman in a thin coat, her posture heavy with exhaustion. Liam's breath caught. As she lifted her face toward the window display, recognition struck him like a blow. "Alara," he whispered. She was thinner now, shadows beneath her eyes, but it was her. She stared into the store, not at people, but at a simple display of fruit and bread. At her legs stood 4 small boys, identical, quiet, holding onto her coat and a battered stroller. One pointed at the window. None cried. Alara knelt before them, whispering something Liam couldn't hear, her face breaking for a moment before she forced a smile. She opened her palm. Coins. Only coins. Liam's heart pounded. 4 years. 4 boys. The resemblance was undeniable. His mother's chin, his own smile. The tablet, the mergers, the money all blurred into nothing. "Stop the car," he said sharply. George hesitated. "Sir." "Stop." The car halted. Liam stepped out into the rain, his expensive suit soaking through as he stared at the life he never knew he had created. George called after him, confused, but Liam didn't hear. He walked toward the woman and the children, his steps slow, his voice unsteady as he finally spoke. "Alara." One tugged gently at her sleeve. "Mama?" he asked in a tiny voice. She smiled again, brighter this time, though her eyes glistened. "Yes, my heart." Hungry, he said simply. Her hand trembled as she rested it on his head. I know, baby. We'll figure it out. Liam's chest tightened painfully. 4 lives. 4 innocent souls. All bound to her, all looking to her for answers she didn't have. And suddenly, with terrifying clarity, he understood. 4 years. 4 boys. The math crashed down on him like a wave. Oh God, he whispered, his voice breaking. They're mine. George turned slowly in his seat. Sir, what did you say? Liam didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the small family beneath the flickering light, on the woman he had left sleeping in his bed 4 years ago, and on the 4 quiet boys whose existence rewrote everything he thought he knew about his life. The rain fell softly around them, uncaring. And for the first time in decades, Liam Thorne felt truly, devastatingly afraid. The shock hit Liam like a blow to the chest. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't slow. It was sharp and physical, as if the air had been punched out of his lungs. His heart slammed hard, once, twice, and for a moment he honestly thought he might fall forward in the seat. 4 years. The number echoed in his mind, loud and unforgiving. 4 years since that night. 4 years since he had walked away without looking back. 4 years since he had convinced himself it was nothing more than a pleasant distraction. And now, 4 children. Quadruplets. No, he whispered, shaking his head, as if denial could save him. No, that's not possible. But the truth didn't care what he wanted. His eyes moved from one boy to the next, studying them with a terrible focus. The resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't only in their matching faces or the way they stood so close together. It was in the details, the kind that couldn't be explained away. One boy had his mother's eyes, but the shape of his chin. Liam's chest tightened painfully. That chin belonged to his own mother. He had seen it every morning in the mirror when he was a boy. Another boy smiled shyly at his brother, and the curve of that smile pulled straight from Liam's childhood photographs. His hands began to shake. That's impossible, he murmured, though he no longer believed it. George glanced back, alarmed. Sir, you're pale. Are you feeling all right? Liam didn't hear him. The world around him tilted. The luxury of the limousine suddenly felt obscene. The tablet beside him slid slightly on the leather seat, its screen lighting up again with numbers, graphs, and profits. He looked at it, and felt nothing. The financial reports blurred, losing all meaning. Billions of dollars meant nothing when compared to 4 small boys standing hungry outside a grocery store. His mind betrayed him, dragging him back 4 years without mercy. The charity gala. The music. The laughter. Alara's smile. Her voice as she spoke about art, about honesty, about things that mattered. The warmth of her body. The way she had looked at him that night, not like a billionaire, not like a transaction, but like a man. The memory, once boxed away and labeled insignificant, exploded open with horrifying clarity. He saw the morning after. Her sleeping peacefully. His phone ringing. The sudden crisis at work. His impatience. The check. The note. How small and cold it suddenly seemed. For your studies. Thank you for a lovely evening. The words burned now. Oh God, Liam whispered, his voice breaking. What have I done? George finally turned fully in his seat. Sir, should I call someone? Liam shook his head slowly. No. He swallowed hard, forcing air back into his lungs. His gaze returned to Alara. She was standing again now, one hand resting protectively on the stroller, the boys clustered close. This wasn't a coincidence. This was consequence. Without another word, Liam reached for the door handle. Sir, George began. Liam pushed the door open and stepped out into the drizzle. Cold rain hit his face immediately, soaking into his suit, but he didn't care. The world felt unreal, as if he were walking through a dream he might wake from at any moment. Sir, wait, George called after him. Do you want me to come with you? Liam shook his head without turning. No. Stay. He closed the door gently behind him and stood there for a moment, letting the rain ground him. His heart pounded in his ears as he took one step forward, then another. Each step felt heavy. What if he was wrong? What if she didn't want to see him? What if she hated him? He moved slowly, carefully, as if approaching a mirage that might vanish if he came too close. Alara was still turned away, speaking softly to the boys. Liam stopped a few feet behind her. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely more than a breath. Alara. The sound of her name hung in the air, fragile and trembling, as the past and present collided in that single word. They talked. For an hour, then two. He fetched her a real drink, a glass of Shiraz, and they drifted from painting to painting. He didn't talk about mergers or market shares. She asked him what he felt about the art, not what he thought it was worth. She told him about her classes, about her dream of restoring old masters' paintings, of bringing something faded back to life. She spoke with a passion that made the room and everyone in it seem like cardboard cutouts. For the first time in years, Liam Thorne wasn't thinking. He was feeling. A spark, long buried under layers of frost, began to glow. It was in the way she listened, her whole body leaning in. It was in her laugh, which felt like sunlight. It was the connection, undeniable and terrifying, that hummed in the space between them. This is going to sound incredibly forward, he found himself saying, his heart pounding like a schoolboy's. But my apartment has a view of the city that, in my biased opinion, rivals any painting in this room. And I have a much better bottle of Shiraz. Would you like to see it? She studied his face, not his suit or his watch. She saw the man behind the billionaire, just for a second. A flicker of vulnerability crossed her own features, then resolve. Yes, she said simply. I would. His penthouse was, as promised, all soaring windows and a dizzying view. But she didn't gasp at the view. She walked to the glass, placed her palm against it, and said, "It feels like you could step right into the sky." Then she turned to him, the city lights framing her like a halo. It must be very lonely up here. The truth of it stunned him silent. He didn't answer with words. He crossed the room, took the wine glass from her hand, and set it down. He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. What followed was not a calculated seduction. It was an unleashing. A night where time and title ceased to exist. It was passion, yes, fierce and consuming, but it was also tenderness of a kind he'd forgotten he could possess. Whispered conversations in the dark, secrets shared without fear of weaponization, laughter that tangled with sighs. She fell asleep in his arms, her head on his chest, her breath warm against his skin. He lay awake for a long time, watching her sleep, a strange, peaceful fullness in his chest he couldn't name. This, he thought drowsily. This is what's been missing. The blaring of his phone shattered the pre-dawn peace. It was Sterling, voice razor-sharp with panic. Liam. The Singapore deal. It's imploding. The regulators just moved. We have a 2-hour window to fly there and fix this or we lose 9 figures. The jet is fueling now. Corporate adrenaline, cold and familiar, flushed the warmth from his veins. He slipped from the bed, Alara murmuring in her sleep but not waking. In the grey light, he moved with silent efficiency, shower, suit, the armor clicking back into place. He paused by the bed. She looked so peaceful, so trusting. A part of him, the part that had felt full just hours before, screamed at him to wake her, to explain, to promise to call. But the louder part, the CEO, calculated. It had been one night. A beautiful, unexpected night. She was a student. She had dreams. He could be practical. He could be helpful. At his desk, he scrawled a check with an amount that would cover a year's tuition and more. On a sheet of his thick, monogrammed stationery, he wrote with his efficient, sharp pen, "For your studies. Thank you for a lovely evening." He placed the check on the note, weighed it down with a crystal paperweight, and set it on the pillow beside her. A clean transaction. A generous closure. He took one last look, his chest tight with something he refused to examine, and walked out, the door ceiling shut on the quiet room and the sleeping woman. For Alara, waking was a slow, sweet unfurling. The smell of him on the sheets, the memory of his hands, his voice. She stretched, a smile on her lips, reaching for him. Her hand found crisp paper. She sat up, the sheets pooling around her. She read the note. Once. Twice. The words, so sterile, so final, seemed to suck all the air from the room. A lovely evening. Like a pleasant theatre performance. For your studies. A payment. The profound connection, the soul-deep intimacy she had felt, the thing that had made her throw caution to the wind, had been, for him, a transaction. A line item. She was a server, after all. He was a billionaire. He'd paid for the service. The heat of shame burned through her, followed by an icy wave of devastation. She dressed with trembling hands, the silken sheets now feeling like a mocking trap. She left the check and the note on the bed, the paperweight holding it all down like a tombstone. She rode the silent elevator down, walked out into the bright, uncaring morning, and shattered. The check, she would later cash out of sheer, desperate necessity when the pregnancy test showed its impossible result. But the note? She burned it in her mind 1,000 times. Its coldness became the wall she built around her heart, the proof that the beautiful thing she'd felt had never been real at all. It was the first wound, the one that made all the wounds to come hurt so much more. On this day, the limousine slowed without warning, the smooth motion breaking just enough for Liam to notice. He lifted his head from the window, his thoughts still tangled in numbers and distant memories, and looked forward. "What's going on?" he asked. George eased his foot off the accelerator and checked the mirrors. "Traffic up ahead, sir. Looks like an accident on the main road. Police have blocked 2 lanes." Liam glanced at his watch, then at the darkening sky outside. "How long?" "Hard to say," George replied. "Could be 30 minutes. Maybe more." Liam exhaled slowly. He hated delays. His life was built on schedules, on control. "Is there another route?" "Yes, sir," George said quickly. "There's a side street we can take. Not the best area, but it'll save time." Liam gave a short nod. "Do it." The limousine turned off the wide, brightly lit avenue and moved into a narrower road. The change was immediate. The buildings grew shorter, older. Streetlights flickered instead of glowing steadily. The sidewalks were uneven, patched and cracked, and the shops looked tired, as if they had been standing there for too long without being noticed. Liam barely reacted at first. He had passed through places like this before, usually without looking. His world existed far above these streets, in glass towers and private elevators. Still, something about the quiet here made him uneasy. George cleared his throat. "Don't usually come this way," he said, as if apologizing. "It's fine," Liam replied, though he wasn't sure why he felt the need to reassure the driver. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, leaving the air cold and damp. Liam stared out the window, his reflection faintly visible against the passing street. He wasn't looking for anything. His eyes moved without purpose, skimming over closed shops, faded signs, and people walking quickly with their heads down. Then the car passed a small grocery store. It was old and narrow, squeezed between 2 worn buildings. Its sign buzzed weakly, one letter barely lit. The windows were fogged, and the light inside flickered as if unsure whether to stay on. A few crates sat outside, empty and broken. Liam's gaze lingered longer than he intended. He frowned slightly. "Slow down," he said. George glanced at him through the mirror. "Sir." "Just slow down a bit." The limousine eased forward. Liam didn't know why he was looking. He had no reason to care. This neighborhood wasn't part of his world. He would never shop here, never walk these streets. And yet, something pulled at him, a quiet unease he couldn't explain. "Strange place for a store," George muttered. "Surprised it's still open." Liam didn't respond. His eyes moved to the front of the store, where a single fluorescent light buzzed above the entrance, casting a pale glow on the sidewalk below. That was when he saw her. She stood beneath the light, half-shadowed, her coat thin against the cold. At first, she was just another figure in the evening. But as the limousine drew closer, Liam felt something tighten in his chest. He leaned forward. "George," he said quietly. "Stop talking." The driver fell silent, confused. The woman was staring into the grocery store window, her face pressed close to the glass. She wasn't looking at people inside or at the cashier. Her eyes were fixed on a small display of food, bread stacked neatly, fruit arranged with care. Liam's heart began to beat faster. He couldn't see her face clearly yet, but there was something familiar in the way she stood, in the slope of her shoulders, in the stillness of her body. "This traffic better be worth it," George said under his breath. Liam didn't hear him. As the car rolled past the store, the light caught her face, and recognition struck him hard. His breath caught. His hand tightened against the leather seat. "No," he whispered, so softly it barely left his lips. George glanced back. "Sir." Liam didn't answer. The limousine continued forward, but Liam's eyes were locked on the figure outside, his mind racing, his heart pounding as the past, long buried, began to stir. "George," he said suddenly, his voice low and sharp. "How far is the next place to turn around?" George hesitated. "Just ahead." "Why?" Liam swallowed. "Because I think I just saw a ghost." There was a pause. The only sound was the dull hum of the diner and the occasional scrape of a chair as a late customer passed by. Liam stared at her, at the weary strength etched into her face, at the way her small hands rested protectively on the table as if it were a shield. He could hardly speak. I'm so sorry. I didn't. I never knew." She looked up at him, her eyes steady, unwavering. "You did know, Liam." In your own way, you did. But you left. You left me to survive alone. And I did. Every day. The quiet in the diner pressed in around them. Liam felt the weight of years, the magnitude of his absence, and the enormity of what had been born that night. The 4 little boys who had never known him, who had grown in a world that had no space for mistakes. And he felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't allowed himself in a long time. Guilt, yes, but also the urgent, desperate need to make it right. Alara returned to counting the coins in her palm, a habit, a ritual of control over chaos. Liam sat back numb, staring at the woman who had survived everything he had failed to see. And he realized that no financial report, no merger, no empire could ever compare to the human cost of a single careless night. Alara's eyes didn't leave the tabletop as she continued, her voice steady, almost hollow. I never tried to contact you. Liam flinched at the words, though he already knew them, deep down. She looked up briefly, meeting his gaze with quiet intensity. I read your note over and over when I found it. Thought maybe I'd misunderstood. But I didn't. The words were clear. For your studies. Thank you for a lovely evening. That was it. That was all I needed to know. Her fingers tightened slightly around her cup. It wasn't just a note. It was a boundary, a message, a door closing. You weren't interested in more, and I understood that. I understood it even when my heart wanted to scream otherwise. And I couldn't reach out. I couldn't call or write. I believed you would never want this burden. That a man like you would never choose us. She shook her head, a small, almost imperceptible movement. And my pride, it's all I had left. I had nothing else. No family, no security, no one to rely on. But I had my pride. And I couldn't let it go just to beg for your attention, your help, your forgiveness. Not even for the boys. Not even for them. So I didn't try. I kept my distance. I survived on what I could, for them. She paused, the hum of the diner filling the silence. Every day, I told myself it was enough. That we would be fine. We had to be. Because asking for more, asking for you, would have been humiliating. And I couldn't. Liam's hand shook on the table. Alara. She cut him off gently, her voice calm, unwavering. You don't get to speak yet. You weren't there. You didn't see us. You didn't know the weight of what this meant. And I had to carry it alone. Her eyes returned to the coins in her palm, small symbols of the control she clung to. And Liam felt the full weight of every lonely day, every sleepless night, every choice she had made silently, without him. He had assumed the night had been forgotten. She had not. She had survived it, and in doing so, had created 4 little lives out of nothing, without a single word from him. And in that quiet moment, Liam realized that his world of wealth and power, his empire of glass and steel, had never taught him anything about courage. Alara had. Each word she spoke struck Liam like a whip across his chest. Every syllable drove deep, leaving invisible welts on his conscience. The life he had treated as a fleeting moment, one night, one name on a check, had become her crucifixion. He had walked away thinking it was casual, simple, inconsequential, and yet here she was, standing before him, weary but unbroken, carrying for lives that had no choice but to bear the weight of his absence. He saw them now, the 4 little boys, their bright eyes watching quietly, their small bodies clinging to her as if she were their only anchor in the world. They were beautiful, intelligent, and resilient, yet painfully fragile, forged in hardship he had never imagined. Each of their faces, each movement, seemed to echo back to him the reality of what his carelessness had wrought. The magnitude of it hit him fully, and he staggered under the weight. He had built empires, commanded wealth, and mastered risk, yet here, in this corner of a forgotten street, he was powerless. The guilt was enormous, pressing down on him like a physical weight, suffocating in its immensity. The realization that his thoughtless actions had created not just suffering, but entire lives that depended on her, crashed over him like a storm. Liam's mind spun, trying to reconcile the man he thought he was with the consequences he now faced. He had assumed responsibility ended with his note, his check, his polite departure. But responsibility didn't end. It had only begun, and he had a lifetime to make it right. Liam's eyes followed them carefully, almost afraid to breathe too loudly and break the fragile world they had built around themselves. The 4 boys sat clustered at the small diner table, legs swinging just above the floor, sharing a single order of fries as if it were a feast. They passed the fries to one another with quiet, careful movements, their tiny fingers precise, their faces serious and solemn, as though this simple act required discipline and mindfulness. There was no fussing, no whining, No grabbing. Just a gentle, shared rhythm born of necessity and understanding. Every time one of them said "Mama," their voices carried a softness, a trust, a devotion so pure it cut straight through Liam's carefully constructed armor. That one word, so small, so ordinary, was filled with reverence, love, and need. His chest tightened. He had built empires and negotiated billions, but he had never felt anything like this power of quiet, unspoken attachment. Then Finn, the most observant of the four, lifted a single fry from the plate. His bright eyes met Liam's with a hesitancy that spoke of caution and curiosity all at once. The tiny smile that tugged at the corner of his lips was shy, almost fearful, as if offering something to a stranger might be taken as a mistake. Liam blinked, frozen, and for a moment, the diner and the rain outside seemed to disappear. The boy's small gesture, so simple, so human, pierced through his guilt and his fear, opening a space in his heart he hadn't known existed. Without thinking, he reached out, taking the fry gently from Finn's hand. "Thank you," Liam murmured softly, his voice barely audible. Finn nodded, satisfied, and returned to sharing the fries with his brothers. But that small act of connection lingered in Liam's mind. It was the first thread weaving him into their lives, delicate and hesitant, but real. And for the first time in 4 years, he understood that he wanted to be part of this quiet, fractured family, even if they didn't yet know it. Liam straightened in his seat, the weight of the past hours pressing on him, and felt something shift inside, a clarity that no contract, no boardroom strategy, no empire of numbers could provide. This was not about business. There were no spreadsheets to consult, no advisors to brief him, no profit margins to consider. This was about righting a wrong, about stepping into the consequences he had ignored for far too long. He looked at Alara, at the four small, wary faces clustered around her, at the quiet dignity in their movements, and his chest ached with a fierce, protective urgency. He had left them, unknowingly, to struggle alone. And now he could do something. Not everything, he knew that, but something. He could begin. He leaned forward slightly, his hands resting on the table, and his voice carried a firmness that startled even him. There was no negotiation in it, no hint that he was leaving the choice to her entirely, but beneath that firmness was a raw, human plea, one he could not disguise. "You and the boys are coming home with me. Tonight." His words hung in the air, simple, declarative, unyielding. "Just, let me fix this. Please." Alara's eyes widened. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, words caught somewhere between disbelief and fear. Liam didn't retreat. He held her gaze, letting her see every ounce of sincerity, every shadow of remorse, every flicker of hope that he was offering not as a favor, but as a promise. "I can't undo the past," he said softly, his voice dropping to a tremulous whisper. "But I can be here now. For you. For them. Let me try. That's all I ask." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The hum of the diner, the distant sounds of the city, the soft patter of rain outside, all of it faded beneath the gravity of his words. He wasn't offering money, or comfort, or a temporary solution. He was offering presence. He was offering himself. And in that moment Liam Thorne, the man who had controlled empires, realized that the most important decision of his life was not in any boardroom. It was here across from the woman and the children he had long failed to see. Alara's eyes flashed with a fierce, almost primal determination. She sat back slightly, pulling the boys closer to her, as if the physical act could ward off the very idea of accepting help. Her hands rested protectively on their small bodies, fingers clutching the fabric of their coats, the edges of their shirts. "No," she said firmly, her voice low but unwavering. We don't need your money, your mansion, your empire. We are not a charity case." Liam's shoulders tensed. "Alara, it's not charity. I'm not offering that. I'm offering—" "I don't care," she interrupted sharply, her voice rising slightly. She drew a quick, deep breath and lowered it again. "We survive on what we have, on what we earn, on what I can do. That's the life we've known, and we've made it work. Don't try to fix what hasn't broken for us. Don't try to buy us with your wealth or your apologies." Her words were fiery, almost defiant, but Liam noticed the tremor in her hands, the faint quiver in her voice, the way her eyes darted down to the boys as if seeking reassurance in their presence. And that's when she saw it, the hole in Leo's small, scuffed shoe. She had patched it once, the best she could, but it hadn't lasted. She looked at Kai, shivering slightly in a jacket far too thin for the evening chill, and her chest tightened. And Noah, the quiet one, gently wiping the crumbs and smudges from his younger brother's face, showing a patience and tenderness beyond his years. The fight, the defiance, the stubborn pride, it drained from her, little by little, until she felt herself exposed to the truth she had been avoiding. This wasn't about her. It had never been about her. It was about them. Her children. 4 small lives she was trying to protect, shield, and sustain with every ounce of strength she had left. Her hands loosened their grip slightly, resting instead on the table, her fingers brushing against the backs of the boys. A single tear escaped, sliding slowly down her cheek. It was the first one she allowed herself, the first one in years that wasn't swallowed, ignored, or hidden behind courage. For them, she whispered, voice barely audible, choked with emotion. She swallowed hard, her pride trembling like fragile glass in her chest. Only for them. Liam leaned forward slightly, his own voice soft but firm, tinged with relief and hope. That's all I ask. Just for them. Let me do this for them. Alara looked down at her sons again. Leo was fidgeting slightly, unaware of the gravity of the moment. Kai was tugging lightly at her sleeve, and Noah's small hand rested protectively on his brother's arm. Her heart clenched, and the wall she had built around herself began to crumble. Her nod was slow, deliberate. One small gesture, but monumental. It was not surrender to him, not yet. It was surrender to the needs of her children. Her breath trembled, and she allowed herself the smallest, most fragile smile. For them, she repeated, this time with a steadier voice, a quiet acceptance that finally admitted the truth she had been denying. Liam exhaled, relief washing over him, but carefully, cautiously. He didn't move too quickly, didn't speak too loudly. He let the moment breathe, let it settle between them, fragile but real. And in that quiet small diner amid the flickering lights and the hum of distant traffic, a fragile bridge began to form. One built on trust, on love, and on the shared need to protect the 4 little lives who were waiting for them to act. The boys stepped into the penthouse slowly, as if they had been told to move carefully through a fragile dream. The space was enormous, stretching out in wide, open plains of polished wood, muted tones, and pristine surfaces that gleamed under the soft, carefully placed lighting. Liam had always loved the minimalist aesthetic, the clean lines and uncluttered elegance that gave him a sense of control and calm. Tonight, however, it only heightened the boys' astonishment. They moved from room to room, their small fingers brushing lightly over the edges of tables and railings, their eyes wide and unblinking. Each discovery seemed to overwhelm them. A faucet that produced hot water at the turn of a handle, a bathtub big enough for more than one child to splash in, a bedroom each with soft, inviting beds, pillows fluffed and waiting. And then there was the food wall, the refrigerator, stocked and organized in a way none of them had ever imagined. Rows of fruits, vegetables, milk, and snacks glimmered like treasures behind the glass doors. They opened it hesitantly, as though the sheer abundance might vanish if they dared touch it. Do we get to eat whatever we want? Finn asked, his small voice breaking the silence. Liam smiled, soft and awkward, unsure how to navigate the awe and fear written on the faces. Yes, he said. You can have whatever you want. The word should have been simple, but the boys didn't leap or cheer. They simply stared, hesitant, unsure. It was as though they had been trained by scarcity to treat abundance with suspicion. One boy reached for a banana, paused, and looked back at Alara, seeking permission as if it were a test. She nodded, small and quiet, and he took it with a delicate, almost reverent grip. Their silence filled the vast penthouse more loudly than any noise could. Liam felt it pressing down on him, a reminder that money and space could not instantly heal years of deprivation. These were children who had learned to be careful, who had been trained by necessity to touch lightly, speak softly, and expect little. Alara moved behind them, her own footsteps careful on the polished floors. She entered the guest suite, a room that would have been considered a luxurious apartment in her old neighborhood, and stopped near the doorway, surveying the space with a wary eye. The walls were bare of clutter, yet covered with art, and the furniture gleamed with an intimidating perfection. A small couch sat across from a television bigger than any she had ever seen, and shelves lined the walls, neat and silent. Finn wandered hesitantly into the living room one morning, eyes wide at the polished black piano gleaming under the morning light. His small fingers hovered above the keys, unsure if touching them might break something. Liam, who hadn't touched the instrument in years since his mother's passing, froze for a moment, a strange mix of nostalgia and unease washing over him. You want to try? He asked, voice soft, almost unsteady. Finn nodded eagerly. Liam knelt beside him, guiding his tiny fingers to the right keys, showing him a simple melody. Just like this, he said. See, one key at a time. The boy's eyes lit up, a pure, innocent joy, and Liam felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't known he'd missed. They played together quietly, the small notes filling the apartment with music and a newfound connection. Not long after, Kai, the energetic whirlwind of the group, was running too fast and tripped over a rug, scraping his knee on the polished floor. The boy cried out, startled, and for a moment Liam's heart raced. He had never been a caregiver in this way. But instinct took over. Kneeling beside Kai, he cleaned the scrape with gentle hands, applied the bandage, and murmured soothing words, careful not to startle him further. There we go, little guy. All better, he said, his voice soft but steady. Kai looked up at him, surprise flickering in his eyes at the gentleness of the man whose presence had always felt intimidating. Noah, the quietest of the four, often wandered off to the vast library, where rows of books stretched from floor to ceiling. Liam found him sitting cross-legged on a carpet, fingertips lightly brushing the spines of the books as if savoring their texture. Liam began sitting beside him each evening, reading aloud stories that ranged from silly adventures to heroic quests. Noah listened attentively, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply resting against the man whose presence had begun to feel safe. These small nightly rituals became a steady rhythm, a bridge of trust between child and guardian. Recognizing the complexity of the boys' needs, and their mothers, Liam hired more than just household staff. A kind, maternal nanny joined to help with daily routines, to teach the boys gently, and to provide warmth and consistency. He also brought in a therapist to guide them through the difficult adjustments, to help them process the sudden shift from scarcity to abundance, from uncertainty to safety. For Alara, Liam ensured that nothing would hold her back. He arranged schedules, support, and resources so she could return to her studies and pursue her dream of art restoration without worry. Every step he took was careful, deliberate, and thoughtful, ensuring that their home was not just a luxurious space, but a nurturing one. It became a place where the children could grow, where Alara could thrive, and where Liam himself could finally learn how to love beyond the boardroom, one small, meaningful act at a time. It wasn't the money, Liam realized, that would make a difference. It wasn't the toys, the spacious rooms, or the well-stocked pantry that mattered most. It was his presence. His being there, in the small moments, the everyday messes and laughter, that began to change the rhythm of their lives. He started coming home earlier, deliberately skipping late-night meetings, trading some of his carefully scheduled business trips for zoo visits where the boys shrieked with delight at monkeys and penguins. Weekend mornings became pancake mornings, sticky flour and syrup on the counters, laughter spilling into the kitchen, the boys' tiny hands reaching for spatulas, and Liam laughing awkwardly as batter splattered across his chute. He listened to Alara too, really listened. Not the polite, distracted attention of a man used to deals and contracts, but deep, thoughtful listening. He absorbed her words about the art she loved to restore, the delicate pieces she longed to work on, her fears about the past and the world she'd endured. He asked questions, remembered details, made small gestures to support her goals, offering encouragement without pressure, without judgment. One evening, after a long day of zoo adventures and errands, Alara returned home quietly, hoping to check on the boys before retreating to her room. She froze at the living room doorway. Liam lay sprawled on the couch, exhausted, his suit rumpled, his hair falling across his forehead. Around him, four tiny bodies slept in a perfect, chaotic tableau. One boy curled against his chest, the others draped over each armrest, and the fourth tucked along his side. Their breaths were even, their small hands resting against him, trusting, unafraid. Alara's heart constricted in a way she hadn't anticipated. This man, the distant, unfeeling billionaire she had once thought she could never trust, was here, in the quiet of the evening, surrounded by children he had barely known a month ago. He was tired, yes, but present, and in that presence was a tenderness she hadn't believed possible. She stepped forward softly, retrieved a blanket from a nearby armchair, and gently covered them all, careful not to disturb their sleep. Her hand lingered briefly on Liam's hair, brushing it back instinctively, and she felt an ache in her chest she couldn't name. He was no longer the untouchable figure she had once imagined. He was human, vulnerable, and entirely devoted. He was failing in the most beautiful way, failing to keep his heart guarded, failing to resist the love that had sprung for these children. And for the first time, she allowed herself to see him as he truly was, a man transformed by presence, by patience, and by the quiet power of showing up every single day. Months slipped by almost unnoticed, each day layering small changes over the last. The penthouse, once quiet and precise, began to hum with life. Tiny footsteps pounded along the polished floors, toys littered corners, and laughter echoed through rooms that had previously only carried the soft hum of appliances. The boys thrived in ways Liam had never imagined. Leo ran from room to room. Finn built towers with blocks taller than his own head. Kai tumbled across the rugs with endless energy, and Noah sat quietly reading books or organizing the shelves, occasionally glancing up with a small smile at the chaos around him. Liam watched them with growing amazement. He had once thought he knew responsibility, discipline, even care. But these children taught him something different, patience, joy, and humility. Each day he rose early to help prepare breakfast, take them to school, or simply play in the living room. He felt a tether forming between them that no amount of money could create. Liam, look at this. Finn shouted one morning, holding up a leaning tower of blocks he had spent 20 minutes building. Liam bent down, offering a proud smile. That's incredible, Finn. You made that all by yourself. Finn grinned, brushing a strand of hair from his eyes. With a little help, he admitted, glancing at Liam, who had steadied the bottom blocks. Kai, as usual, was climbing on the furniture, laughing as Liam pretended to chase him. Stop, stop. Liam called, laughing despite himself. You'll break something. No. Kai cried, giggling, and bounced onto the sofa. Even Noah, quieter than the rest, began to approach Liam more openly, often curling up beside him during story time and asking soft questions about the characters in the books. Liam found himself answering patiently, marveling at the boy's keen mind and gentle curiosity. And then, one ordinary afternoon, the moment came that made Liam's chest tighten with both awe and fear. He had been helping the boys wash up after a messy craft project, the room smelling faintly of glue and paint. Leo, who had been unusually quiet, tugged gently at his sleeve. Dada. The word hung in the air like a fragile crystal, shining and terrifying all at once. Liam froze, his hands gripping the counter a little too tightly. He turned slowly, meeting Leo's wide, hopeful eyes. Leo, he whispered, his voice catching. Alara, standing just behind him, gasped softly, her own hand coming up to her mouth. The room went still. For a heartbeat, nothing else existed. No laughter, no clutter, no noise, just that single, sacred word. Dada, Leo repeated, as if testing it, seeking reassurance, and Liam knelt down immediately, gathering him into his arms. Yes, yes, Leo. Dada, he murmured, his voice trembling with a mix of joy and fear. Finn, Kai, and Noah watched silently, their own expressions unreadable, as if waiting to see what this would mean. Liam held Leo close, heart pounding, aware that a line had been crossed, a wall had fallen. The word was small, but it carried an ocean of trust, hope, and love, and he knew in that moment that nothing, no money, no career, no past mistakes, mattered more than this fragile, perfect connection he had just been given. Alara's eyes softened as she stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Liam's shoulder. He means it, she whispered. Liam nodded, swallowing hard, overwhelmed by the weight and beauty of the moment. He had never been called Dada before, and now, for the first time, it felt like home. The days had grown warmer, and the evenings longer, but inside the penthouse, a different kind of warmth had begun to settle. Liam and Alara moved around each other with ease now, though it was subtle. Quiet, a shared glance over the heads of the boys as they scrambled across the living room, a soft laugh exchanged while washing dishes side by side in the kitchen. It was a warmth built not on one fleeting night years ago, but on the steady rhythm of care, patience, and shared responsibility. Their connection simmered gently, like a fire fed by mutual respect, admiration, and the growing love that had slowly taken root between them. One night, after tucking the boys into bed, Liam turned on soft music in the living room. The apartment was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the floor and the distant hum of the city outside. Alara leaned against the doorway, hesitant, unsure, and yet drawn by the familiar presence of the man who had once been a stranger. Liam stepped closer, holding out his hand, a tentative invitation. Dance with me, he asked softly, almost shyly. She hesitated, then allowed herself a small nod. Their movements were slow and unpracticed, swaying gently in the empty living room. It wasn't a perfect dance, it was awkward, stumbling at times, but it was theirs. Liam's hand rested lightly on her back, and Alara's on his shoulder, and in that simple touch, in the quiet rhythm of the moment, something profound passed between them. When their faces drew close, he pressed a gentle, lingering kiss to her lips, tender and healing, a promise of a future rather than a shadow of the past. Yet even as their hearts opened, Alara's past trauma lingered, whispering doubts in the quiet corners of her mind. She wondered, often in the stillness of the night, if Liam's love for them was truly for who they were, or if it was simply guilt and need to make up for years of absence. Her pride, her fear, and the protective instinct that had kept her going for 4 long years surged forward with renewed force. She felt like an intruder. Every polished surface felt like a judgment, every unbroken line of the room a reminder of how far removed this world was from the one she had lived in for the past 4 years. She clenched her hands lightly, not wanting to show fear, not wanting to seem weak, and she maintained a careful distance from Liam. He stood in the hallway, watching the boys explore, unaware that she was struggling just as much with this new reality. They're scared, she whispered under her breath, though Liam could hear her. They've never had this, he said quietly, coming closer. They don't know it's safe. Alara shook her head, looking at him without meeting his eyes. It's not just them. It's me. Everything here. It's too much. Too big. Too perfect. I don't belong in this world. I don't belong here. Liam hesitated, unsure whether to argue or give her space. You do, he said gently. You belong with us. Not because of the penthouse, not because of the money, but because you're theirs, and they're yours. And because I need you here too. She blinked, swallowing hard, her pride fighting with the ache in her chest. I don't know if I can just walk into your world, she admitted softly. It's not my place. I'm not used to this. Everything feels wrong. You don't have to be used to it yet, Liam said, his voice low, patient. We'll figure it out together. One step at a time. Just don't shut the door completely. She looked back at the boys, still exploring with quiet fascination, and a small part of her began to relax. But the protective instinct never fully left her. She stayed in the corner, her eyes vigilant, her body tense. She would adjust, she knew, slowly. For now, her presence alone was enough, a steadying force, a guardian of the small, fragile family that was beginning to grow in this vast, strange new world. Liam had thought he was prepared. He had stockpiled toys, blocks, cars, stuffed animals, puzzles, even a small train set. He had imagined that a little indulgence, a few gifts, a few luxuries, would be enough to bridge the gap between him and 4 small boys who had lived without him for so long. But as he watched them, standing stiffly in the middle of the living room, eyes wide and wary, he realized how wrong he had been. The boys didn't run to him, didn't grab the toys with excitement. They touched them lightly, turned them over, put them back down. Their silence, their carefulness, was deafening. This isn't working, Liam muttered to himself, voice low, pacing the room. Maybe they don't need things. He wandered into the kitchen to grab a cup of coffee, hoping to gather his thoughts, but the sound of a small cry stopped him mid-step. It was soft, almost muffled, but it cut through the quiet like a knife. Leo. The smallest, most sensitive one. Liam's heart twisted. He had never heard a child cry for comfort in a way that made him feel so powerless and responsible all at once. He didn't think. He didn't plan. He ran to Leo's room, fumbling with the door handle as the cries grew louder. There, he saw the boy curled up in bed, sweat dampening his tiny hair, eyes wide with fright. Liam's hand shook as he stepped inside, unsure what to do. He had never cared for a child in his life. Not like this, not personally, not in the messy, human way that demanded patience, empathy, and instinct. He sat on the floor beside Leo's bed, feeling completely exposed, completely out of his element. It's okay, he murmured, voice low and uneven. It's just a dream. I'm here. Nothing can hurt you. The boy didn't answer, only buried his face deeper into the pillow. Liam exhaled, trying to steady himself, and then, without thinking, he began to tell a story. There once was a brave little knight, he said, his voice uncertain at first. He wasn't very tall, and his armor was a little too big, but he had the biggest heart in the kingdom. And one night, a scary dragon came to his village, breathing fire and smoke, but the little knight, he wasn't afraid. No, not at all. He had friends, 4 of them, and together, they made the dragon laugh instead of roar. And the dragon became their friend. Leo peeked from under the covers, curiosity sparking in his eyes. The crying softened. Liam's confidence grew a little, a flicker of pride lighting his chest. Soon, Finn appeared in the doorway, then Kai, and finally Noah, each drawn by the sound of his voice, each unsure, hesitant, but needing the comfort, the warmth, the presence of someone who was finally here, who cared. They gathered around him slowly, sitting on the plush carpet, wide-eyed but attentive. Liam continued the story, improvising, stumbling over words, laughing quietly at the ridiculous antics of the brave little knight. The room filled with quiet giggles, soft murmurs, and the occasional whisper of again or tell me more. Liam had no script, no plan, only the raw instinct to soothe, to connect, to be there. And bit by bit, he felt it, an invisible thread forming between him and the boys. Alara stood in the doorway, hands folded in front of her, her breath caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. She watched quietly, unwilling to interrupt, unwilling to break the fragile trust forming in front of her eyes. Her heart softened fraction by fraction, watching this man who had once seemed so distant and untouchable, now sprawled on the floor, telling silly stories, his face alive with effort, warmth, and humanity. By the end of the night, Leo's cries were gone. Finn leaned against Liam's shoulder, eyes half closed. Kai had curled up beside him, and Noah rested his small head gently on the carpet, eyelids drooping. The brave little knight had saved them all, it seemed, but it was Liam, wholly unprepared and wholly present, who had done it. Alara allowed herself a small smile, barely perceptible, but it was there, a quiet acknowledgement that perhaps, just perhaps, this man could be part of their lives, not through money, not through gifts, but through the one thing that mattered most, presence. Her doubts deepened when, a few days later, she accidentally overheard one of Liam's business associates at a dinner party. The man's words were light, casual, but cutting. Ready-made families, huh? He's got gold diggers lining up, I'd say. The laughter that followed felt like a knife against her chest. That night, Alara lay awake, listening to the soft breathing of the boys in their beds, and the fear clamped tight around her heart. She could not allow herself, or them, to be hurt again. With trembling hands, she packed a small bag, precise and quiet, trying not to wake anyone. Each folded shirt, each carefully rolled pair of socks, felt like a small act of protection. She whispered to herself, "I'm saving them. I'm saving us." By the time the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, her bag was packed, her resolve set. She would leave before anyone could stop her, before affection turned into dependency, before love became a weapon against the fear she could not shake. For her, running away wasn't cowardice, it was courage. It was survival. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a small, fragile part of her still wondered if love might somehow find a way to reach her, even through the wall she had built. He found her just as she reached the door, her small bag resting by her feet, her hand trembling on the handle. The early morning light spilled into the room, pale and quiet, catching the fear in her eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Liam moved, fast and unsteady, as if the ground beneath him might give way if he hesitated even a second. "Alara," he said, his voice rough. "Please, don't go." This was not the man who ruled boardrooms or silenced rooms with a glance. This was not the billionaire who negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. This was a man stripped bare, standing on the edge of losing the only thing that had ever truly mattered to him. Before she could speak, before she could turn away, he dropped to his knees in front of her. The sound was soft, but the meaning thundered through the room. "Don't go," he said again, his voice breaking. "Please." Alara gasped, stepping back instinctively. "Liam, don't do this," she whispered. "You don't have to." "I do," he interrupted, looking up at her with eyes full of fear and truth. "I have to. Because if you walk out that door, I lose everything." She stood frozen as he spoke, the words pouring out of him like something long buried and finally freed. He told her about the loneliness he had carried for as long as he could remember, how success had filled his days but never his heart. He told her how that single night with her, years ago, had been the last time he felt human, not powerful or important, just real. And how meeting his sons, had shattered a void he had tried to fill with money, work, and ambition. "I spent billions trying to ignore how empty I was," he said softly. "And then they walked into my life and filled it without trying. They are not a mistake. They are not a burden." His voice trembled. "They are not a consequence, Alara. They are my miracle." Tears welled in her eyes, but she stayed silent, afraid that if she spoke, she would fall apart. "And you," he continued, swallowing hard, "you are not just their mother to me. You are the brave, incredible woman I fell in love with 4 years ago and was too blind, too afraid, to see clearly. I am falling in love with you all over again, every single day." He reached into his pocket with shaking hands and pulled out small velvet boxes. Not a ring. 4 delicate pendants lay in his palm, each engraved with a tiny initial and birthstone. Then he opened the final box, revealing a simple, elegant necklace that caught the morning light. "This is not a transaction," he said quietly. "It never was. This is a promise. A promise to show up every day, to protect them, to love them, to earn you, to earn all of you." He looked up at her, eyes shining. "A promise to spend my life proving I am worthy of you, of them, of us." Alara dropped her bag. It hit the floor softly, forgotten. Her knees weakened as she sank down in front of him, hands covering her mouth as the tears finally fell. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that love could be steady, that it could stay, that it didn't have to hurt to be real. In that quiet moment, with the city waking around them and 4 little boys sleeping down the hall, something irrevocable changed. This was no longer about guilt or redemption. It was about choice. And love, chosen bravely, was standing right in front of her. Alara looked into Liam's eyes and saw something she had never seen before in anyone. Not pity, not guilt, not obligation, but raw truth. His love was there, open and unguarded. His fear was there too, but so was his resolve. This was not a man trying to fix a mistake. This was a man choosing a family, choosing her, choosing 4 little boys every single day. Her heart, tired from years of fighting alone, finally loosened its grip on fear. She reached out slowly and touched his face, grounding herself in the reality of him. "I believe you," she whispered. "I see you." Her voice trembled, but her choice did not. "I can't promise marriage yet," she said honestly. "But I can promise this." She placed his hand over her heart. "I'm saying yes to the promise. Yes to the family. Yes to us." Liam closed his eyes, a quiet breath escaping him, as if he had been holding it for years. He nodded, reverent, grateful, and pulled her gently into his arms. For the first time, the future did not feel frightening. It felt possible. Weeks later, he asked again, but not with grandeur or flashing cameras. He planned a family adventure instead. The botanical gardens were alive with color that morning, sunlight filtering through tall glass ceilings, flowers blooming in every shade imaginable. The boys ran ahead, laughing, their small voices echoing among the plants, while Alara walked beside Liam, unaware of what he had carefully arranged. They reached a secluded greenhouse, warm and quiet, filled with soft petals and the scent of fresh earth. The boys suddenly stopped and turned toward her, their faces glowing with excitement. Each one stepped forward, clutching a single rose. Finn spoke first, nervous but proud. "Will you?" Leo continued, smiling shyly. "Make us." Kai added, bouncing on his heels. "A real family." Noah finished softly, looking straight into her eyes. "Forever." Alara's breath caught as tears filled her eyes. Before she could answer, Liam stepped forward. He held out a simple ring, crafted from intertwined platinum and rose gold, elegant and unpretentious, just like the life they had built together. He knelt, not in desperation this time, but in hope. "Alara, my love," he said, voice steady and full. "Will you let me be their father, officially, and your husband, endlessly?" The greenhouse seemed to hold its breath as Alara looked at the boys, then at the man who had chosen presence over power, love over fear. She smiled through her tears and nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, to all of it." The boys cheered, wrapping themselves around her legs, and Liam rose, slipping the ring onto her finger with trembling hands. In that moment, surrounded by growing things and second chances, they were no longer broken pieces trying to survive. They were a family, chosen, healed, and finally home. The wedding was quiet but filled with sunlight, laughter, and the gentle rustle of leaves